What if the very roads meant to connect us become the pathways to dread? What if the midnight highways hide more than just shadows, and the long-haul drivers who travel them are running from nightmares that never sleep? Tonight, we sift through the fork and tires tracks to reveal the truth concealed in the darkness. This is Verified Nightmare, where every nightmare is real, and every story is verified. On tonight's journey, we will explore 15 true trucker nightmares that haunt our highways. Stories pulled from police reports, eyewitness accounts, and declassified documents that prove these aren't just tales told by the campfire. They are real experiences, lived and survived, or lost to the night forever. So, before you hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell, remember what you're about to hear will make you look twice at every passing rig, every empty road, every quiet, lonely rest area. Because out here, the road never forgets, and neither does Verified Nightmare. The Black Ice Incident. David Harper was a 39-year-old long-haul truck driver known among his peers for his punctuality and calm demeanor behind the wheel. A quiet man from Cedar Falls, Iowa, he had a methodical routine, waking at dawn to call his family, triple-check his rig's maintenance, then embark on his cross-state routes. He treasured the predictable rhythm of life on the road, the familiar hum of his 18-wheeler, and the small towns that dotted the highways. These places, with their quiet diners and tree-lined streets, were the brief refuges that kept him grounded between shifts. On a cold February evening, with the low winter sun already swallowed behind grey clouds, David began his final leg traveling from Minneapolis to Des Moines. The highway was mostly empty, the asphalt slick with patches of black ice concealed beneath a thin layer of snow. The temperature hovered just below freezing, the kind of cold that seemed to freeze time itself. He was hauling a refrigerated load of produce, something he had done countless times with no incident. At precisely 6:42 p.m., just beyond the small town of Fairview, Iowa, David noticed something odd, a light flicker on his rearview mirror. It was subtle, an intermittent shadow drifting across the mirrored glass, but there was no vehicle behind him. The highway was deserted save for the occasional sputtering light of a distant farmstead. He chalked it up to fatigue or a trick of the low light, focusing instead on the road glistening ahead. The first unsettling event came shortly after. Around 7:15 p.m., as David passed an abandoned gas station illuminated faintly by a dying neon sign, his radio crackled to life unexpectedly. The CB channel he kept on for company, channel 19, standard for highway chatter filled with static, before a voice broke through. It was low and distorted, barely coherent. "Turn back, turn back." They watched the roads. The voice whispered before the line abruptly went dead. David flipped the radio off and on, but only silence greeted him. No calls for help, no echoes, just the sharp, metallic sighs of the wind. He shrugged the voice off, telling himself it was a prank by some bored driver or a glitch in the radio. Still, an uneasy tension settled in as he caught a glimpse of a figure standing at the edge of the road, just past a curve a mile ahead. At first, it was the shadow of a man, motionless, outlined by the cold light from a distant street lamp. David blinked, and the figure vanished. An hour later, his fuel gauge warned him he was low, so David pulled into a rest area nestled between towering pines. The place was deserted, except for a lone truck parked near the far exit with its engine idling softly. The driver inside didn't acknowledge him when he stopped to stretch or refill a bottle at the vending machine. There was nothing overt, but the silence from the cab was unsettling. At 8:50 p.m., as David settled back into the driver's seat, locking the doors, his phone vibrated quietly on the passenger dashboard. A text message flashed from an unknown number. "Not safe tonight. Keep moving." The message lacked context or signature, but its timing was too precise to be coincidence. David stared at the screen. A second message arrived instantly. "They don't want you here." The hair on the back of his neck prickled as he tried to make sense of the warnings. Eyes scanning the dark tree line beyond the parking lot, he felt an overwhelming sensation that unseen watchers lurked just beyond the glow of the streetlights. Minutes later, his headlights caught movement near the rear of the lone truck. David could make out silhouettes, at least 3 figures moving in a slow, deliberate approach under the cover of the night. No engine revving, no flash of headlights, just the weightless glide of figures appearing without sound. David's hands trembled as he locked the ignition and started his rig. He considered calling the police but dismissed it, fearing no help would arrive on deserted rural highway at this hour. Driving away, his rig's tires slipped on a small patch of ice at the exit ramp. He remembered that sensation all too well, the terrifying loss of control as the road beneath turned to hazard. For a brief moment, the truck spun sideways, fishtailing dangerously close to the embankment before steadying. As David regained control and sped onto the highway, the radio burst into static again, voice returning clearer this time. "You can't outrun the road." Chill settled deep in his bones. The warnings were real, but from whom or what? He could not say. Back on the road, David reached for his phone to call home, when suddenly the headlights ahead flickered once, twice, and vanished into the night. The road ahead seemed to stretch infinitely, but there was no sign of the vehicle he had glimpsed moments ago. His GPS faltered, glitches erasing towns and rerouting in impossible loops. For the next 20 minutes, David noticed subtle changes, mile markers that didn't match the map, road signs listing towns that no longer existed according to official records, and fog that thickened inexplicably around his rig. At 9:25 p.m., he tried to radio into dispatch. The call connected, but the voice on the other end was not the usual dispatcher. "It's too late, David. The highway takes what it needs." Those words chilled David far more than the February cold. When David finally reached Des Moines just after midnight, his relief was short-lived. Local police had been alerted to a series of break-ins targeting tracks at nearby rest stops. Eyewitness accounts described strange figures tampering with locks, figures that vanished on approach, leaving only frozen tire tracks in their wake. Video security footage showed shadowy forms gliding outside trucks without footsteps or sound. David reported the strange encounters to authorities. According to the official case file from the Polk County Sheriff's Department, the descriptions from David's testimony matched those of other truck drivers who had recently experienced similar incidents along that stretch of Interstate 35. The unusual weather conditions combined with these reports led to warnings being issued to drivers about traveling alone at night. In the weeks after, David claimed to receive more text messages from unknown numbers, cryptic warnings that ceased only after he stopped night driving entirely. His trucking company, noting his anxiety and inability to focus, removed him from routes passing through the affected areas. Yet, the last chilling detail remains unresolved, preserved in the official report. On the night David finally quit driving those highways, a local farmer near Fairview reported hearing distant engine noises, a truck's lights intermittently flashing. When law enforcement arrived, no vehicle was found, only a frozen patch of highway black ice, reflecting the moonlight. The marks on the surface resembled tire treads, but no trucks had been logged traveling that route for hours. David Harper's story was corroborated by police records, dispatch logs, and a handful of other eyewitness accounts, but to this day, no definitive explanation has been found. The official case file states only that the highway itself seemed to harbor something beyond nature's laws, something forged in the cold, darkness, and silence where roads twist and vanish. And some nights, according to declassified documents obtained months later, similar phenomena continue to resist explanation, haunting those who travel the night long after the roar of engines fades away. What drives a nightmare down an empty highway? The question lingers like the last breath of a winter wind across black ice, unseen, unpredictable, and chilling enough to make even the toughest trucker hesitate. The haunting of Route 66. Mark Jennings was a 45-year-old truck driver with a keen eye for detail and a reputation for never missing a delivery deadline. A widower from Amarillo, Texas, he found solace in the endless highways of America, often remarking that the road was the only place where he could feel peace after his wife's tragic passing. Mark's cabin was covered with photos of sunsets over expansive deserts, and his rig was outfitted with the latest GPS and dash cam technology to ensure safety as much as efficiency. The stretch of road Mark preferred most was a portion of historic Route 66, a storied highway winding through small towns that seemed to be frozen in time. For years, he had traveled this route, enjoying the nostalgic signs, quaint diners, and the friendly faces that greeted him during stops. According to police reports and trucking logs, this route carried a significant amount of freight traffic, but Mark had never encountered anything out of the ordinary. Until the night of October 13th, the sun had set hours earlier, and the neon lights of some of Route 66's timeless landmarks flickered weakly through the cold desert night as Mark drove his rig loaded with electronics bound for Los Angeles. He was about halfway through his 570-mile journey and planned to stop at a well-known track stop near Winslow, Arizona, to rest before continuing. The night air was crisp, the sky clear with stars shining faintly through the desert haze. Mark's routine, precise schedule included checking his dash cam at each break, ensuring it was functioning properly. Around 11:03 p.m., as he neared the track stop, his dash cam began recording strange interference. The screen flickered abruptly, then returned to normal, but the footage showed something unsettling. For a moment, a translucent figure appeared, drifting past the passenger side window, barely visible, then vanished in an instant. Mark's eyes darted toward the window, but saw only the empty road stretching past mesquite bushes and the faint glow of distant headlights. He rationalized it a glitch in the camera, a trick of light, but the feeling of being watched settled deep. After parking his rig, Mark stepped into the track stop. Inside, the atmosphere was unreal. The usual hubbub of tired travelers was missing. Only a few patrons sat scattered among the tables, faces pale and eyes avoiding his gaze. The clerk at the counter, a middle-aged woman named Susan who had worked there for years, greeted Mark with a tight smile, but her hands trembled slightly as she handed him a receipt. Mark struck up conversation lightly, asking about the usual crowd and road conditions. Susan's voice lowered to a whisper, and she glanced nervously toward the window. "There's been strange things lately," she said. "Truckers disappearing, trucks found abandoned with loads intact. People say they hear voices on their radios at night, voices that speak names no one should know." According to Susan, these accounts weren't just local legends. Several had been officially reported by drivers passing through the area. The Winslow Police Department had confirmed multiple investigations tied to missing persons and vehicles discovered in conditions that defied explanation. Official case files revealed they connected alarming reports to the stretch of road between Winslow and Holbrook. Mark felt a shiver that was unrelated to the desert chill. He thanked Susan but sensed an urgency beneath her words, a warning disguised in hospitality. Later, in the quiet solitude of his rig, Mark powered on his CB radio to check for chatter. The static initially hissed through the speakers, but suddenly a voice broke in, calm yet impossibly distant. "Don't trust the road, it watches." The transmission cut abruptly, replaced by the steady hum of white noise. Mark's instincts screamed for caution, yet curiosity kept him listening. Over the next hour, strange phenomena escalated. The GPS unit flashed erratically, routing him in impossible loops through areas without roads. The radio whispered fragmented phrases as though voices were carried on invisible waves. "Behind you." They walk between. Lost souls linger. The temperature inside the cabin dropped sharply. His breath fogged the windows despite the heater running full blast. Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying with it a faint melody, haunting notes like an old country tune played on a broken jukebox. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, another 18-wheeler, its beam casting sharp shadows in the sand. Mark's relief turned to dread when the truck emerged alongside his rig, the driver obscured but seemingly staring intently through the window. As Mark adjusted his mirror, the vehicle vanished. No other cars followed. Determined to press on, Mark continued west, but the unsettling experiences piled up. He noticed landmarks shifting places, rest stop signs pointing toward nowhere, and the road surface beneath his tires changing texture, unpredictably rough patches giving way to smooth asphalt, then gravel, all within seconds. At one point, Mark pulled over to record the strange GPS behavior. According to the official GPS logs later reviewed by authorities, coordinates often didn't align with known maps. This anomaly baffled analysts who noted glitches persisted even under satellite oversight. Around 1:17 am, Mark glimpsed an abandoned vehicle wrecked along a turnoff ramp. The truck was charred and crushed, a faded logo on the door barely readable. Approaching cautiously, he found no driver or passengers, only scattered belongings and an open logbook. The entries ended abruptly weeks prior. Mark reported the vehicle to local law enforcement. Police documents included photographs of the wreckage and Mark's testimony, linking it to a series of disappearances noted in the region. Driven by a mix of fear and resolve, Mark activated his dash cam again and resumed driving. Suddenly, his rig was jolted by a violent, unexplained collision. No impact detected, but the rig's instruments went haywire. According to the dashcam playback reviewed by the police, nothing was physically present at the moment of the shake, yet all monitoring systems registered a severe disturbance. Mark recalled freezing in place, heart hammering as his eyes searched the infinite darkness beyond the headlights. The quiet was overwhelming. Minutes later, as he neared Holbrook, his CB radio crackled to life once more. This time, the voice was identifiable, a dispatcher from his company sounding urgent. Mark, turn back immediately. We've lost contact with several drivers on Route 66 tonight. Reports of ghost trucks, strange sightings. You're not alone out there. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving static to fill the silence. Months later, cross-referencing dispatch logs and police reports confirmed Mark was among several drivers who had reported these phenomena in a span of weeks. A joint investigation involving state police and the Department of Transportation issued warnings about traveling this segment after dark. Mark retired from nocturnal trekking shortly after, citing sleep disturbances and unexplained anxiety. Yet, the most haunting element remained. According to an internal investigation report, Mark's dash cam captured at least 2 instances of shadowy figures walking alongside the highway, figures for whom no matching records or witnesses could be found. These phantom walkers were a subject of intense debate among investigators. Even more unsettling were the post-incident texts Mark received on his company phone, messages containing cryptic coordinates and phrases in languages he did not understand, all traced to suspicious digital sources with origins that defied location. The official case file concludes with no definitive explanation, leaving open questions as to the true nature of the forces haunting Route 66. The legend of lost drivers, ghost trucks, and the strange voices on the radio persists, verified through multiple reports and eyewitness testimony that exacts a chilling imprint on the history of America as Mother Road. Mark Jennings' experience serves as a stark reminder. The longest journeys are not just measured in miles, but in the mysteries left in their wake. When the radio crackles and the road calls out to you, heed the warnings. The miles may stretch endlessly, but some highways led nowhere good. The vanishing on Highway 17, James Carter, was a 33-year-old truck driver known for his meticulous nature and sharp instincts on the road. Hailing from Asheville, North Carolina, he had built a reputation among his peers for being reliable and cautious, especially when traveling the often deserted stretches of mountain highways. His rig was a well-maintained Peterbilt 579, equipped with the latest technology, including a high-definition dash cam and GPS tracker. James was proud of his punctuality and his habit of calling home every evening to check in with his wife and daughter. On the evening of March 22nd, under a twilight sky darkening quickly into night, James set out on a familiar route along Highway 17, which wound its way through rugged terrain and thick forest in the western Piedmont region. The area was known for its breathtaking landscapes, cozy roadside inns, and a handful of small towns that clung to the valley bottoms. According to official traffic data, this road saw relatively low volume during the late hours, adding to the solitude many drivers appreciated, including James. The first anomaly presented itself nearly an hour into his drive. At approximately 7:45 p.m., while passing near the town of Elkin, James noticed a series of reflective markers on the guardrail seemed to shimmer oddly in his headlights. The effect resembled a sudden shimmer of heat rising from pavement, despite the cool March temperatures. He adjusted his mirrors, aware that something was not quite right but unable to name it. Shortly after, the CB radio on Channel 17, the popular truckers channel for that area, flickered with an unusual burst of static, followed by a voice that was barely audible, but unmistakably urgent. "Keep moving, don't stop." They watched the turns. The voice faltered into static again before dropping completely. James reached to switch frequencies, but the radio was jammed with white noise. He jiggled the dials, but could produce no clear transmissions. His experienced mind questioned whether it was interference or something stranger. As he continued, the road began to narrow and twist more sharply. Dense woods pressed close on either side, and mist began to coalesce around the tree line, drifting toward the highway like creeping fingers. The temperature inside the cab dropped suddenly, causing his breath to mist before the heater adjusted. At 8:17 p.m., his GPS announced a calculated turn toward the town of Little Switzerland, but the satellite navigation briefly faltered, recalculating erratically. The GPS screen blinked off and on, displaying coordinates that did not match any known location on official maps. James slowed his rig and pulled to the shoulder near a small lookout point marked with a historic plaque referencing old mountain legends. The place was quiet, save for the distant cawing of birds settling down for the night. He stepped out for a moment, jacketed against the chill, and stretched his neck. The vista below revealed a blanket of fog crawling through the valley beneath a familiar sight that suddenly felt otherworldly. Returning to the cab, James noticed a small black folding knife lying on the passenger seat, which he did not recognize or recall placing there. Tentatively, he pocketed it, an odd feeling creeping in that someone or something had entered his vehicle during his brief stop. At 8:54 p.m., headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. A car, low and black, followed James' rig at a cautious distance, never attempting to pass. The vehicle's headlights dipped once, then blinked repeatedly in a pattern James interpreted as a signal. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Minutes later, during a hairpin turn, the black car abruptly vanished from sight. No exit ramps, no side roads, no place for it to turn off. The asphalt showed no signs of breakaway or skid marks. Unease mounted. Over the radio, static morphed into whispering voices. Now and then, he caught a name that chilled him to the core. James, don't trust the path. His gaze flickered to the GPS, which had begun overlaying transparent, ghostly images on its screen maps within maps, some depicting roads erased from memory or existence. Within the space of 20 minutes, James experienced several lapses in time awareness. One moment, his rig chugged along steadily through a wooded stretch. The next, he found himself farther along with no memory of the miles traveled. His odometer reading remained steady, but the feeling that he was caught in some temporal loop gnawed at him. At 9:23 p.m., James pulled off at an isolated rest area. The lot was empty except for a weathered pickup truck parked at the far edge, its lights off and engine cold. No driver emerged. A subtle sound caught his attention, soft footsteps approaching, too light for their pace, as if made by a weightless presence. Heart pounding, James locked the cab and peered into the darkness beyond the truck stop lights. He saw an indistinct shape, a figure cloaked in shadow, watching him from the edge of the parking lot. James reached for his phone to call his wife, but found it did no signal, no battery life, despite the device having been fully charged earlier that day. This detail was later confirmed in the forensic examination report, which showed no technical malfunction to explain the sudden power loss. At this point, according to James' official report filed with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, his anxiety escalated into outright terror. He started the rig and attempted to leave, but the engine sputtered as if choked by unseen hands. The dashboard instruments flickered off and on in frantic pulses. Then the radio began to emit a new sound, a pattern of distress signals in Morse code. James, having knowledge from previous training, recognized the signals as a plea for help, repeated over and over in a loop. His dash cam recorded vivid images during this symptomatic episode. Faded road signs displaying the names of towns erased decades ago. Mist thickening into humanoid shapes wandering ghostly along the roadside, and the black car materializing once again in his mirrors, its driver's face never visible. According to a subsequent interview with the investigating officer, local police found traces of unknown footprints encircling James' rig at the rest stop, footprints that abruptly ended as if sinking into the earth. The next morning, authorities recovered James' truck abandoned on the shoulder near a turnoff. He was missing. An extensive search ensued, encompassing hundreds of square miles of forest and mountain terrain, utilizing drones, helicopters, and ground teams. But no trace of James Carter was ever located. According to declassified documents obtained months later through Freedom of Information requests, the case became a focal point of a mysterious series of disappearances along Highway 17. Interagency communications reveal that multiple drivers have reported similar experiences of time loss, strange figures, and spectral vehicles. Investigators concluded, based on James' recorded data and eyewitness testimonies, that whatever haunted this stretch of highway operates outside known physical laws, interfering with electronic devices, altering perception of time and space, and targeting lone travelers. The final line in the police report offers a haunting note left by James before his disappearance, an encrypted message on his rig as GPS reading, deciphered only after the investigation. Trust not the road you know. It is a mirror to what follows. To this day, James Carter's fate remains unresolved. Official records mark him as missing. Last seen on the night of March 22nd on Highway 17. His disappearance, along with similar accounts, stands as confirmation, through eyewitness accounts and verifiable data, that some roads hold secrets beyond understanding, nightmares lurking at the edges of reality, waiting for those who travel the night. In the endless black of a mountain highway, being alone can be deadly. The road appears familiar, but it is a twisting veil concealing dangers no driver should face. For James Carter and countless others, the nightmare was no accident, it was a haunting. The truck stop shadows Eric Lawson was a 42-year-old truck driver from Springfield, Illinois. A man defined by routine and an unflappable calm that had kept him safe over 20 years on the road. Meticulous in his habits, Eric did not believe in shortcuts or ignoring oddities. He credited this discipline with a near-spotless safety record. Outside of work, he was a family man, devoted to his wife and to children, whose voices he heard every night over a crackling cell phone connection before sleep. On a chilly September evening, Eric began what was supposed to be a routine run, hauling freight from St. Louis to Springfield over interstate highways that he had driven countless times. The weather was clear, and his rig, a sturdy Freightliner Cascadia, was freshly serviced. Everything checked the exact specifications. The early stages of the journey felt normal. The steady drone of tires on asphalt, the ebb and flow of distant headlights on a vast rural highway. At around 8:15 p.m., as Eric approached a truck stop near Effingham, Illinois, a place known for its 24-hour service and friendly atmosphere, he noticed something peculiar. The station was unusually quiet, empty even. Not a single truck was parked in the lot, an oddity given the time and the location's reputation as a popular rest spot on this route. Pulling in, Eric switched off his rig and stepped into the dimly lit convenience store. The air was stale, and the usual hum of fluorescent lights was replaced by an eerie silence. The shelves were stocked, but no customers or staff were visible. Eric called out, but was met only with an unsettling stillness. Decision made. He grabbed a coffee cup from the counter and poured himself a drink using the self-serve machine. As the steam rose from the cup, he noticed something in the reflection of the glass case, a figure standing just behind him, unmoving, spinning around. Eric found the space empty apart from the flickering shadows cast by the store as dim emergency lighting. But the sensation that he wasn't alone lingered, black and pressing in the quiet. He nodded to himself, an attempt to shake off the creeping unease, and returned to his rig. Once inside, Eric's CB radio spontaneously activated on channel 14, the local trucker channel for that region. Crackling static filled the speakers before a voice spoke clearly but coldly. "They're here. Watch the shadows." The transmission cut abruptly. Eric tried changing channels but met only silence or static. An internal log later submitted with the official police report confirmed the moment and recorded the strange broadcast. 20 minutes into his next leg, Eric's dash cam began to malfunction, footage showing corrupted frames and ghostly after images that, independent analysis revealed, could not be attributed to camera defects or external interference. Along the highway, shapes seemed to flicker in the peripheral vision, dark forms standing just beyond the tree line, at times reflected in side mirrors, had gone when looked at head-on. Despite the absence of noise, faint rustling carried on an invisible breeze. The highway lights and mile markers appeared distorted, the numbers sometimes reversing or skipping unpredictably. At approximately 9:12 p.m., Eric pulled off at another rest stop near Vandalia, Illinois. According to official rest stop visitor logs obtained through investigation, the place was entirely vacant aside from Eric's truck. Circumstances grew more surreal as Eric noticed his rig doors began to lock and unlock on their own. The interior lights turned off and on erratically, and the radio sent out faint static that almost formed whispers. Standing outside, Eric saw his own shadow lengthen grotesquely along the cracked pavement, stretching unnaturally as though animated by an unseen force. Suddenly, shadows on the ground around the truck seemed to detach and move independently, slinking toward the roadside brush. The official police file includes eyewitness testimony from a passing driver who reported seeing ghostly figures pacing the edges of the highway near Vandalia that night. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses caught fleeting glimpses of forms appearing and disappearing with no obvious cause. Eric, shaken, called dispatch to report the unsettling occurrences. The operator assured him of local alerts posted to warn drivers of recent incidents, but advised him to continue his route with caution. The call was recorded and entered into the official investigation docket. Returning to his rig, Eric found a handwritten note on the floor of his cab, the ink smeared but legible. "Not everyone returns from the night. No one had seen anyone leave the truck or enter it." The note's origin remains unknown and untraceable despite analysis by law enforcement handwriting experts. At 10:04 p.m., Eric's radio engaged once again, the voice this time calm but layered with a mechanical undertone. "You see only what they allow. Stay awake or become one." The message was chilling, and with it, the truck's instruments flickered and died. The headlights dimmed, and for a moment, Eric was shrouded in darkness on the isolated interstate. Using his phone's flashlight, he inspected the cab, trying to locate the source of the electrical failure. The digital log of his track recovered later from black box memory showed multiple inexplicable power surges corresponding precisely with these events. Minutes passed in agonizing silence, broken only by a slow tapping at the window. Eric turned toward the sound and saw in the darkness a figure standing just beyond his peripheral vision. Indistinct but undeniably there. Frozen, he watched as the figure dissolved into thin air when he tried to focus directly on it. Eventually, Eric managed to restart the engine and continue. He arrived at his destination hours later, physically unharmed, but profoundly altered by the night's experiences. The official case file compiled by Illinois State Police includes Eric's statement corroborated by wrist stop surveillance, the dispatch call logs, and digital evidence from his vehicle systems. Further investigation revealed that similar reports of shadowy figures, unexplained messages, and electronic interference had occurred regularly in the region over the past decade. Yet no conclusive explanations ever emerged. The final note in the police report reads, "The incidents defy current understanding of natural phenomena and suggest an active and persistent presence able to manipulate perception, electronics, and space around lone travelers." Eric Lawson left trucking the interstate nights shortly after, citing an unshakable fear that the shadows followed him beyond the highway. Declassified documents obtained after the investigation remain heavily redacted, but hint at ongoing research into these highway entities and their consistent pattern of targeting drivers who stop alone at night. For those who spend their lives on the road, the nights are long, and sometimes the shadows wait silently for their chance. In the emptiness of an interstate truck stop, what lingers may not be human, and sometimes it watches until you never leave. The ghost trucker of Interstate 70, Michael Grant, was a 37-year-old truck driver from Columbus, Ohio, known among his colleagues for his steady nerves and no-nonsense approach to the challenging demands of long-haul trucking. He had been driving professionally for nearly 15 years, covering thousands of miles across the Midwest and the East Coast. Michael's rig was a matte black Kenworth, outfitted with the latest tracking and safety systems, a setup he prized for helping keep him and his cargo safe during those solitary late-night miles. When off the road, Michael was a family man, devoted to his wife and young son, often sharing photos of his journeys with them during his scheduled calls. On a particularly quiet night in early November, Michael set out from Indianapolis, Indiana, to deliver a high-priority shipment to Denver, Colorado. The route took him along the busy yet sometimes lonely stretches of Interstate 70, a corridor infamous for its winding paths through rugged terrain, isolated rest stops, and frequent weather changes. At precisely 7:38 p.m., while cruising at a steady 65 miles per hour through the rural expanses of eastern Kansas, Michael noticed something unusual in his peripheral vision. A large vehicle, a semi-truck, was tailing him too closely, its headlights burning brightly against the dusk. Glancing in the rearview mirror, Michael noted the truck was an older model Peterbilt, its paint faded and peeling, with no visible identifying markings. Suspicious but not alarmed, Michael toggled his CB radio to channel 19, seeking friendly chatter, but the channel was ominously silent. The trailing rig stayed locked exactly 100 feet behind his, matching his speed precisely despite the smooth progress of the highway. Just before 8:05 p.m., the strange truck closed in suddenly, its high beams flickering rapidly. Michael's rig jerked as if buffeted by an invisible force, and a cold wind gust seemed to slam through the cab despite the climate control system running at full. As Michael adjusted his mirrors, he caught his own breath. The Peterbilt had vanished. Baffled, he slowed to 50 miles per hour and scanned the road behind again, but the lane was empty. No other vehicles followed. His heart thudded unevenly. Upon reaching a rest area near Goodland, Kansas, at 8:25 p.m., Michael pulled into a dimly lit parking lot filled with the quiet hum of distant generators and a few scattered trucks. He parked and sought to shake off the bizarre experience with a stretch and a cup of coffee. Inside the rest stop's convenience store, Michael noticed that the few fellow travelers present seemed uneasy, their eyes darting to corners and shadows as if expecting something untoward. The clerk, an elderly man named Harold, uttered cryptic remarks about the ghost rig and the highway that swallows men whole. During a brief conversation, Harold revealed a long-standing local legend, a mysterious truck rig allegedly seen by multiple drivers, appearing without markings and tailing late-night travelers. The ghostly Peterbilt was said to signal impending doom for those who encountered it, acting almost as a harbinger or warning. Michael remained skeptical but intrigued. He thanked Harold and returned to his rig, noting a faint chill lingering in the air. The windows seemed to fog inward subtly despite no external moisture. At 9:02 p.m., restarting the engine, Michael's CB radio came alive again with static and faint whispers. Fragments caught on the airwaves that included his name, spoken softly but clearly. On the highway, Michael's onboard dashcam began capturing unusual phenomena. Flickers of shadowy figures reflected briefly in the passenger side window, accompanied by intermittent audio glitches resembling faint breathing or whispered voices. He reviewed the footage later, which was officially collected by Highway Patrol investigators after he reported the incident. The camera data could not be explained by technical faults and included temporal distortions, such as frames repeating or skipping unpredictably. Around 9:30 p.m., as Michael pressed westward under a moonless sky, his GPS unit started to malfunction. Coordinates shifted erratically, sometimes directing him to non-existent exits or looping him onto roads that didn't appear on standard maps. Michael's phone began receiving strange, untraceable text messages containing coordinates and phrases like, "Don't trust the rear view." Suddenly, at mile marker 324, without warning, Michael's rig was forced to the shoulder by an unseen force strong enough to cause the truck to jerk violently. The after-action reports include telemetry data showing rapid, unexplained fluctuations in vehicle control and engine output during this event. As he tried to stabilize his rig, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror again. The ghost Peterbilt was back, this time closer and riding his tail with glaring intent. Michael engaged his CB radio and attempted contact, only receiving distorted responses. "You can't outrun the highway. They watch every mile." In a bid to escape, Michael accelerated. The mysterious rig matched his speed instantly. The radio began emitting a repetitive, low-frequency pulse, causing his truck's dashboard to flicker. Suddenly, the strange rig disappeared once more, and the road ahead cleared. Early the next morning, Michael arrived safely at his destination in Denver, visibly shaken but unharmed. His company reported the incident, and State Highway Patrol opened an investigation due to similar accounts from other drivers. In the official investigation file, multiple testimonies from long-haul drivers described encounters with the ghost trucker that mimic Michael's experience. Surveillance from highway cameras caught fleeting images of an unmarked semi-truck appearing and vanishing in impossible manners. Further, declassified electronic logs revealed that previous truckers tailing such rigs often reported subsequent disappearances or inexplicable delays. Months later, Michael received one final, chilling communication, a postcard mailed anonymously, postmarked from an unrecognizable town with no return address, bearing only a simple message: "The road never forgets." To this day, the legend of the ghost trucker on Interstate 70 stands as a verified nightmare. Documented in files held by local authorities and corroborated by dozens of eyewitness accounts, logs, and recordings, the entity remains unexplained, an eerie constant in the landscape that continues to haunt the weary and the watchful. Among the endless highways, some shadows ride side by side with reality. And sometimes, the road doesn't just guide you home, it traps you in its endless darkness. The last convoy of desolation past Cameron Hodge was a 48-year-old veteran truck driver, with over 25 years of experience navigating the vast and often unforgiving American roadways. Originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, Cameron had the rugged demeanor and steady resolve that comes from decades spent alone behind the wheel. He believed in preparation, discipline, and the silent respect that trucks and their drivers shared on the long haul. But no amount of experience could prepare him for the strange events he would later report along a narrow stretch of mountainous highway known locally as Desolation Pass. The setting was autumn, a crisp October evening tinged with fading daylight. Cameron's rig was a late model Volvo, meticulously maintained, hauling a shipment of electronics destined for Portland, Oregon. The highway, Interstate 84, was known for its breathtaking but deadly curves through the Cascade Mountains. Many truck drivers regarded Desolation Pass with caution because of its reputation for sudden weather shifts and occasional road closures. According to traffic records and weather station logs, the night Cameron began his journey, conditions were deceptively calm, clear skies, temperatures hovering just above freezing. At 6:27 p.m., Cameron joined the highway near Hood River, Oregon, initiating what should have been a standard 6-hour drive through steep passes and dense forests. At first, the drive was peaceful, the golden hues of fall trees reflecting in the side mirrors. The rhythmic pounding of tires on pavement was his steady companion. At precisely 7:15 p.m., as Cameron rounded a particularly isolated bend surrounded by towering pines, his CB radio crackled with chatter. What caught his attention wasn't the normal trucker banter, but a frantic call on Channel 20, interrupted by static and broken speech. Convoy down. Need backup. Desolation Pass. The transmission was abruptly cut off, and despite repeated attempts, no further communication was received. Cameron was a seasoned operator, so he immediately scanned the route ahead and behind for any sign of trouble. Minutes later, his headlights illuminated several abandoned vehicles, trucks, and cars parked haphazardly along the shoulder in unusual spots, some with doors ajar as if their occupants had fled. Police reports later confirmed these were registered stolen or missing units from various states. Their presence here baffled investigators. Puzzled but concerned, Cameron reduced his speed. Then an unexpected sound began to reverberate through the cabin, the low hum of engines, distant at first, but steadily growing louder. Looking into the rearview mirror, Cameron was stunned to see a line of at least 5 trucks behind him, their headlights piercing the twilight, but no driver visible through the windows. The rigs moved in perfect formation, keeping pace flawlessly, but emanating no engine noise. According to verified eyewitness testimony collected from other truckers who passed through Desolation Pass that night, similar phantom convoys had been reported on multiple occasions, creating a growing legend among the trucking community. Cameron reached for his CB radio, urgently attempting to hail these trucks, but got no response. The static on the channel seemed to intensify, and fragmented voices whispered unintelligible pleas, warnings, and fragmented names. As the convoy silently shadowed him, strange occurrences multiplied. Cameron's GPS began displaying impossible roads that twisted into dimensions not recorded on any maps. His dashboard flickered between readings in miles and kilometers, then blanked altogether for a full 5 minutes, according to vehicle telemetry data officially logged. At 8:03 p.m., the first and most terrifying phenomenon happened. The convoy suddenly vanished as if swallowed by the thickening morning fog rolling in from the valleys below. But the radio remained alive, crackling with more urgent messages. Don't stop. Stay on the move. They wait where the dead road bends. Despite understanding the unnerving advice, Cameron decided to pull over briefly at a small mountain rest stop illuminated only dimly by a lone flickering street lamp. Investigators later confirmed that no other vehicles had been at this site in that time frame. Outside his rig, Cameron felt a deep, oppressive silence unlike anything he had encountered before. The air felt thick, and shadows lengthened unnaturally. He noticed a figure standing just beyond the glow of the streetlight, a man in a weathered trucker's jacket, face obscured beneath the brim of a worn hat. Cameron tried to call out, but the figure vanished like mist drawn into the night air. The official report collected by Oregon State Troopers references this encounter verbatim, noting it was corroborated by CCTV footage from a nearby gas station. The footage, later declassified, showed a blurred human shape moving inexplicably through the rest stop's parking lot, phasing through the solid steel frame of Cameron's truck. Refusing to dwell on the apparition, Cameron restarted his rig and pressed onward. However, the strange transmissions on his radio grew more insistent, often repeating parts of his own name or details of his family information only known to close friends. At approximately 9:26 p.m., as Cameron descended a particularly steep grade, his rig's headlights flickered and dimmed irregularly. The GPS, disoriented, began directing him off the highway onto an unpaved logging road. Reluctantly, Cameron followed, realizing that staying on the main road meant losing radio contact and potentially being isolated. The logging road, rough and narrow, twisted deeply into the forest. As he drove, the radio suddenly quieted, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. The atmosphere grew colder, and then the engine cut abruptly. The emergency vehicle logs recovered later confirmed this outage. Cameron was stranded for 58 minutes until he managed to restart the rig manually. During that time, cabin cameras recorded faint voices murmuring from the radio speaker, overlapping with the sound of chains dragging and distant engine noise that never approached. When Cameron finally regained cell service near a small town an hour later, he called dispatch and then the local sheriff's office, reporting the convoy and other events occurring in Desolation Pass. Months of investigation followed. Police reports assembled from dispatcher calls, cell tower logs, and vehicle forensic data confirmed Cameron's timeline and described multiple authentication sources for the radio transmissions and dash cam footage. Several other truck drivers also came forward with near-identical accounts of haunting convoys, disappearing rig shadows, and unexplainable communication breaks along that highway. The official case file notes in a chilling summary, these events, verified through multiple sources and witness statements, suggest an active anomaly within Desolation Pass. Investigations continue, with special task forces addressing the ongoing safety concerns for highway travelers. Cameron, forever changed by the experience, stepped back from long night hauls, citing unspeakable fear and a persistent feeling of being watched whenever he returns to the western routes. Despite extensive searches, the mysterious lost convoy drivers have never been located. It's widely speculated that many were lost in the wilderness, victims of the strange force that seems to claim those who heed the call of Desolation Pass after twilight. In the world of trucking, miles mark distance, but sometimes they measure something darker, the passage into the unknown. For Cameron Hodge and the forgotten convoy, the nightmare still echoes along the mountains. A nightmare that no one has yet escaped. The silent signals of Route 129, Peter Malone, was a 40-year-old truck driver from Chattanooga, Tennessee, known among fellow drivers for his calm demeanor and unwavering focus on safety. He had been on the road for nearly half his life, moving goods across the eastern states while maintaining a meticulous routine to avoid the inherent dangers of long-haul driving. His rig, a comfortably aged International Lone Star, was fitted with standard safety technology CB radio, GPS navigation, and an older model dash cam that had been reliable through countless miles. On a damp October evening, Peter prepared for a run that would take him from Atlanta, Georgia northwards, along a less traveled path including State Route 129, a winding road that cuts through dense forest and rolling hills before joining the interstate near Tennessee's border. The section, known locally as the Snake, had earned its nickname for its serpentine curves that demanded respect from even the most skilled drivers. Despite its beauty, the road had recently gained notoriety following a string of strange incidents reported by truckers and travelers alike. Peter, however, was unaware of these stories as he settled into his routine. It was just past PM when he crossed the Georgia-Tennessee state line, the fading amber light of dusk giving way to thickening shadows beneath an overcast sky. The air was cool and moist from earlier rain, and a faint mist began to cling low to the valleys lining the roadway. About 20 minutes into his journey along Route 129, Peter encountered his first unsettling anomaly. Without warning, his CB radio sparked to life with a burst of static. Then a message whispered through the interference. "Stop, don't follow." The voice was barely audible and distorted, but unmistakable. Peter adjusted his microphone to respond, but the channel fell silent. Curious and concerned, he repeated the message into the radio. "Who is this?" "What do you mean?" No answer came. Shortly after, Peter noticed his GPS recalculating erratically, shifting his route onto lesser roads that he hadn't selected. Moments later, the screen flickered, briefly displaying coordinates that did not correspond to any location on his known route or on official maps of the area. The dash cam began to malfunction, the screen breaking up with colorful static and strange shapes flickering through the image. When he later reviewed the recordings submitted intact with his official statement, they showed shadowy figures standing by the roadside. Mere flashes but definite humanoid outlines that faded whenever the camera focused fully. Peter slowed his vehicle as the road became increasingly less ordinary. Mile markers skipped numbers, and the signs showed names of towns that did not exist. At 8:05 p.m., Peter reached a small rest area nestled in a bend of the highway, surrounded by dense trees and thick fog rolling in from the valley below. According to state park records, the lot was rarely used after sunset, but the night was eerily silent when he stopped. While stepping out, he noticed a weathered signpost marking an old dirt access road leading into the woods, overgrown but still visible. As he refilled a cup at the nearby vending machine, the CB radio suddenly crackled again. This time, the voice was clearer, a confident male tone, calm yet urgent. "Turn back while you can. They come when the silence is broken." Peter's mind raced. "Who are you? What do you mean?" he asked, but only static replied. Looking up, he caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of the parking lot, a figure stepping back into the shadows of the trees, vanishing before he could get a good look. Minutes later, returning to the cab, Peter found his rig's door handle cold to the touch, frost forming despite the mild night air. The official police report filed after the incident noted this anomaly, confirmed by the rig's onboard sensors, which detected sudden temperature drops localized near the doors. As he drove on, the radio continued to flicker with fragmented messages, phrases like, "Not all who wander go missing, but those who stay get taken," and "Highway watches, it's silence a trap." The constant interruptions made focusing difficult, but Peter pushed ahead. Then, at 9:01 p.m., a radio burst came through that startled him. The voice identified himself as Miller, a long-haul driver missing from the route 2 years prior, whose disappearance had baffled authorities. Miller warned Peter of an entity that preyed on lone truckers traveling Route 129 after dark, a presence able to manipulate electronics and disorient drivers to cause accidents or lure them off the road. The conversation, authenticated in part by subsequent intercepted radios and verified by eyewitness testimony, was chilling. Peter's GPS malfunctioned again, this time guiding him onto an unpaved Forest Service road. Despite his reservations, he followed, compelled by a mixture of dread and curiosity. The locking rope twisted deep into the wilderness. His phone lost signal completely. Darkness closed in, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Suddenly, his rig shuddered violently without warning. Systems powered down except for his dash cam. The windshield fogged over, obscuring vision. According to the dashcam footage reviewed by investigators, humanoid shadows appeared to walk alongside the truck, pacing just outside the beam of headlights, their forms shifting like mist or smoke. Peter reported hearing whispers, unintelligible at first, but soon forming into haunting repetitions of his own name. The vehicle's engine stalled briefly before roaring back to life. Peter's hands trembled as he gripped the wheel, praying for an end to the nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, the service road rejoined the main highway. Peter's phone signal returned, and he was able to call dispatch to report the strange experiences. In the days that followed, multiple truckers reported similar encounters on Route 129, creating a pattern of verified phenomena: strange radio communications, phantom figures, distorted electronics, and unexplained disappearances. The official case files compiled by Tennessee State Police included Peter's testimony, dashcam footage, GPS and radio logs, and corroborating statements from other drivers. Experts who analyzed the data concluded that the events involved an unknown environmental anomaly or entity manipulating both electromagnetic fields and human perception. Peter retired from night driving on isolated routes, declaring in interviews that the highway seemed to hold something malevolent, lurking in the silence and shadows, invisible but deadly. On Route 129, the silence isn't peace, it's warning. The signals come through, but not all hear them in time. For those who do, the highway offers a choice: turn back or disappear into the night forever. The curse of the Midnight Crossroad. Richard Ellis was a 44-year-old truck driver hailing from Knoxville, Tennessee. He was known for his precision on the road, a professional who valued routine above all else. Richard's rig was a 2016 Mack Anthem, customized by him for maximum comfort and safety. He took pride in his extensive knowledge of regional routes and the small towns they connected, often recalling details about diners, roadside attractions, and the quirks of various highways. His family relied on him, and he called his wife every night without fail. On a damp October evening, Richard began the last leg of a long journey hauling construction materials from Nashville toward Charleston, West Virginia. His chosen route took him along Highway 60, a stretch known to truckers as the crossroad due to its convergence of several old freight routes. The highway was calming in daylight, lined with dense trees and rolling hills. But at night it grew eerie, especially near a particular intersection locals referred to as Midnight Crossroad. At 8:07 p.m., Richard was cruising steadily when his radio abruptly crackled to life. "You shouldn't have come this way," a whisper poured through the static. Richard, knowing the channel was normally silent, muttered into his MIC, "Who's this? What do you mean?" No answer came, only a chilling silence. His truck's electronics flickered unpredictably, dashboard lights dimming, GPS struggling to maintain signal. The official maintenance report later showed no faults. Minutes later, while passing the lonely crossroads marked by an ancient, rusted signpost, Richard glimpsed movement near the tree line. A figure, motionless, dressed in a faded uniform, stare-fixed on the highway. The presence sent cold fear down his spine. He blinked and the figure faded. Pulling into an empty rest area just beyond the crossroads, Richard stepped out, seeking refreshment and clarity. The emergency lights cast long shadows, and as he entered the small diner, silence greeted him. No patrons, no staff. Overhead, an old jukebox crackled to life with a haunting, scratchy country tune, played eerily slow. Richard noticed another man at a corner booth, his face obscured by shadows. The man spoke in a low voice. "Midnight Crossroad takes what it wants. You're already marked." Richard tried to engage, but found himself alone when he turned back. The diner was empty, save for the soft hum of a flickering light. Back at his rig, the CB radio sputtered again. This time, several voices interleaved, warnings, pleas, and names, some of which Richard recognized from missing persons lists. The names weren't random. They were drivers who had disappeared near the same crossroads over decades, their fates still unsolved. At 9:15 p.m., the truck's external lights pulsated erratically. The GPS lost all mapping, blanking out. Richard's dash cam recorded unexplainable visual anomalies, translucent faces appearing momentarily in the windows and reflections of ghostly trucks following close behind, silent and relentless. He continued driving, though a creeping fog rolled over the road, swallowing streetlights and muting the usual soundscape. The air grew heavy, charged with unseen energy. Suddenly, his rig's engine shuddered violently, and the truck veered as if steered by unseen hands. Richard fought for control on the slick pavement, where one misstep could send him over the roadside embankment into the ravine below. An official accident report later documented skid marks matching his testimony and detailed vehicle diagnostics showing sudden unexplained input commands at the moment of struggle. Regaining stability, Richard's rig came to a halt briefly near an ancient, faded roadside billboard, depicting images of silhouetted trucks and a cryptic warning, "Beware those who travel after dark." Radio static transformed into a broken melody that somehow echoed over the CB channel refrains from old trucker ballads about lost drivers and cursed roads. Finally, nearing the outskirts of Charleston, Richard's rig emitted a low warning beep. Fuel was critically low, but his fuel gauge fluctuated wildly, defying logic. He pulled into the last rest stop before town, only to find several trucks abandoned, their keys still in the ignitions. Police later investigated, tagging the vehicles as involved in previous disappearances or unexplained abandonments near the midnight crossroad. Richard called his dispatcher, officially reporting the bizarre events, radio transmissions, and his fraying nerves. His case file, preserved in state police archives, includes recordings of the CB radio static and reports from surveillance cameras capturing fleeting shadows near his rig. Months after, Richard confided to investigators that despite extensive searching, he wasn't certain he ever truly left the crossroads behind. The experience haunted him. Shadows seemed to follow him even days after the night drive. This story is corroborated by eyewitness accounts, emergency calls, and official documentation, all pointing toward an unexplained force tied to the midnight crossroad, a place that continues to claim the attention and fear of those who dare to pass after dark. For some highways, the journey is not about distance, but survival, and at the crossroads, the night waits patiently for its next traveler to lose their way. The road may shine with headlights, but sometimes it leads only to shadows. The Whispering Highway of Route 287 Cole Dawson was a 36-year-old truck driver from Fort Worth, Texas. Known throughout the trucking routes for his composure and sharp focus, he had earned a reputation for precise and efficient deliveries. Carl's rig was a modern Freightliner Cascadia, fitted with all the latest in safety technology, including GPS, dash cam, and a CB radio he kept on for company during long drives. Off the road, Carl was a family man, married with 2 young children, and he made it a point to speak with them every evening before settling in for the night. It was a rainy night in late November when Carl began a routine haul from Dallas to Denver, following Interstate 187 for a significant portion of the journey. Route 287 was known for its rolling terrain and stretches through open plains and forests, but it also carried an eerie reputation among truckers, especially for a stretch down the Whispering Highway, a remote segment nestled between small towns where inexplicable phenomena had been reported for decades. At 8:10 p.m., while navigating a particularly narrow curve near the town of Muletoe, Texas, Carl's radio suddenly filled with static and then whispered voices. At first, they were unintelligible soft hissings and soon grew clearer, uttering fragmented warnings and pleas. Turn back. Don't go. They're watching. Silent hunters. Carl, seasoned but startled, flipped the radio's channel, hoping to clear the interference. But the voices persisted through all frequencies. Shaking off the unease, he focused on the slick, rain-drenched pavement ahead, the steady rhythm of windshield wipers providing some comfort. Just past mile marker 112. His GPS momentarily glitched, diverting him onto an unmarked side road he did not recognize. The route led deeper into an isolated forested area. Despite his efforts to override the navigation, the system insisted on this course, rerouting him repeatedly until he reluctantly complied. Within minutes, the atmosphere shifted. The radio began emitting low-frequency pulses, and Carl noticed faint whispers creeping up the audio dial. The temperature inside the cab fell sharply. His breath fogged the windows despite the heater running full blast. Around 8:45 p.m., resonance grew inside the vehicle. A dull, rhythmic vibration felt rather than heard. The rearview mirror caught a flash of movement, and for a split second, Carl saw a shadowy figure standing in the clearing adjacent to the highway, invisible when he turned his head. He tried to steady his nerves and called his dispatcher to report the odd signal interference and navigation anomaly. The call connected briefly, then dropped abruptly, leaving only dead air. Next, Carl noticed strange clear imprints appearing on his truck's windshield, condensation, faint handprints, and smears not matching his own or any external source. Forensic analysis later confirmed these impressions were neither caused by ordinary moisture nor human touch. At 9:05 p.m., his truck's illumination systems flickered. Dashboard lights dimmed and brightened erratically. According to the rig's diagnostic logs, systems experienced brief intermittent failures without detectable cause. As Carl approached a desolate rest area, he observed a small gathering of trucks parked unusually close, an arrangement inconsistent with drivers' typical behavior. Their cabs were silent and dark. No figures were visible. He parked and stepped outside, noting the heavy silence. The air was dense with fog rolling in from the nearby plains, so thick that visibility was limited to barely 10 feet. The CB radio sputtered an unintelligible broadcast, an urgent plea repeating a name that made Carl's heart freeze. His own. Suddenly, a shadow loomed just beyond the streetlight's glow. Carl turned sharply, but found no one there. The sensation of unseen eyes piercing through the fog enveloped him. As he returned to the cab, the radio carried a new message, clearer and chilling. They come with the silence. Listen closely, or you will be next. His rig's engines suddenly stuttered, the gauges swinging wildly and headlights dimmed to near darkness. The radio hissed into unintelligible static. After regaining control, Carl drove on, the fog lifting by 9:45 p.m. as he rejoined the main highway, but the experience left a lingering dread. In the following days, he reported the incidents to the Highway Patrol and Company Dispatch. Official investigations corroborated his account with radio logs, dashcam recordings, and similar reports from other truckers. Multiple drivers have described experiencing the eerie whispers, unexplained system failures, strange shadows, and disorienting navigation along Route 187 in that region. The investigations have been documented extensively in state police files and trucking company safety records. Despite thorough searches, no physical source or explanation has been found for these phenomena. Declassified documents reveal an ongoing study by state and federal agencies into anomalous electromagnetic fields and unusual climatic patterns in the area, but conclusions remain elusive. Carl stopped night routes along Route 287 after their trip, convinced of an unseen presence capable of manipulating both environment and technology to isolate and terrify drivers alone on the Whispering Highway. For those who traverse Route 287 after dark, The whispers carry more than sound. They are warnings echoed from past lost souls, reminding us that some highways hold secrets we were never meant to discover. The vanishing at Blue Ridge rest stop. Joseph Thompson was a 39-year-old truck driver based out of Roanoke, Virginia. With over a decade on the road, he was described by fellow drivers as vigilant and disciplined, meticulous about his schedule and the care of his Kenworth T680. Joseph was a regular on the mountainous routes of the Appalachian region, often transporting freight between Virginia and the Carolinas. Family was central to his life, and every night he made it a point to call his wife and children before settling in, no matter how long or taxing the day had been. On a crisp October evening, Joseph took on a long haul from Charlotte, North Carolina, to Roanoke. His route would take him through the iconic Blue Ridge Parkway, a scenic but notoriously treacherous stretch dotted with numerous rest stops and pull-offs mesas overlooking the vast Appalachian expanse. One such rest stop, known only as Blue Ridge Rest, was infamous amongst locals and drivers alike. Not for its amenities, but for the chilling, unexplained disappearances that had occurred there over the decades. At precisely 7:42 p.m., Joseph pulled into Blue Ridge Rest to take a short break, his rig idling beside a handful of other trucks under the dim glow of a lone flickering street lamp. The thick forest ringed the parking lot, and a sudden breeze rustled the colorful autumn leaves. The usual hum of crickets and night creatures was strangely absent. An unnatural silence seemed to press in. Stepping out, Joseph stretched, his eyes tracing the familiar layout, the weathered wooden benches, a closed shelter, and a faded billboard warning drivers to use caution on the winding roads. Yet, something about the place felt off, as if it were waiting. While refilling his coffee, Joseph noticed a message scrawled on the dusty parking meter nearby. "Don't stay. They watch at night." He shrugged of the warning as a prank, yet a shiver ran down his spine. As he returned to the cab, the CB radio suddenly crackled to life on channel 16. Static gave way to faint voices, overlapping chatter that grew louder momentarily. Blue Ridge. Don't stop. Lost in the shadow, the transmission cut abruptly, plunging the cab back into silence. Minutes after departing, Joseph's truck experienced a series of electronic malfunctions: a flickering dashboard, intermittent GPS signal loss, and the dash cam switching off without warning. He noted these irregularities in a log, later entered into the official investigation records. Driving cautiously, Joseph advanced into the dense fog that had begun enveloping the highway, mist so thick it reduced visibility to mere yards. His headlights barely penetrated the gloom, and the road ahead curved unpredictably. At 8:10 p.m., as Joseph rounded a tight bend near the old Raven Rock overlook, a sudden, inexplicable feeling gripped him, the sensation of being observed, stalked even. His peripheral vision caught movement, a shadowy figure standing at the tree line, barely visible but undeniably present. When he glanced directly, the silhouette vanished as though swallowed by the mist. The official accident report later noted that a brief lapse in Joseph's driving continuity occurred, as if time slowed or skipped. He had minor veering of the lane but regained control immediately. Moments later, the CB radio interrupted again, this time with whispered voices pleading, "Help us, trapped." The rest stop claims. Joseph's hands clenched the steering wheel, heart pounding. The voices became a jumbled chorus of names, some matching missing person reports filed in the region. The intersection of true accounts and passenger lurks gave credence to these spectral broadcasts. At 8:57 p.m., while climbing a hill, Joseph's rig headlights illuminated a lone truck parked across the highway's shoulder, its door invitingly open but empty. He slowed, scanning for the driver, but found no one. Then came an unnatural cold, the rig's temperature gauge dropping sharply despite the mild weather. Reports later revealed the vehicle experienced localized frost under the windshield wipers. Joseph tried to call his wife, but found no signal. His phone screen flickered erratically, displaying messages with coordinates and phrases like "the night takes its due" and "Blue Ridge hides its secrets." Suddenly, the radio surged with powerful static, followed by a single, chilling sentence repeated over and over: "You will not leave." According to dispatcher recordings entered into official police records, Joseph's frantic transmission requesting assistance ended abruptly. The next morning, the trucking company filed a missing persons report after Joseph failed to arrive. A week later, local authorities discovered Joseph's rig abandoned at the Blue Ridge rest stop parking lot, key still in ignition, engine cold. An exhaustive search of the area turned up no sign of Joseph, despite tracking dogs and aerial scans. Shockingly, his dash cam was recovered intact, the footage revealing glitches and anomalies inconsistent with technical failure. Investigators found spectral images, fleeting glimpses of faces pressed against the windows and figures standing just beyond the beam of the headlights. Audio analysis picked up subtle whispers and pleas, many matching known missing persons in the area. The official case file concluded that Blue Ridge Rest Stop was the site of numerous unexplained disappearances tied to a phenomenon disrupting time, space, and perception. Federal Highway Patrol and local law enforcement continue to treat Blue Ridge Rest as a hazardous zone under special surveillance, warning drivers and hikers alike to avoid stopping at night. Friends and family hold out hope for Joseph's return, but the official cause of disappearance remains unresolved. In the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains lies a place where the road ends, and the nightmare begins, a place where the night is alive, and the silence is the scream of those lost forever. The rest stop waits patiently, whispering to the next traveler waiting for its claim. The spectre on Highway 95. Samuel Brooks was a 47-year-old truck driver hailing from Savannah, Georgia. Renowned for his steady hand and calm presence amidst the chaotic demands of long-haul freight, Samuel carried a quiet confidence that soothed those around him. With 15 years on the road under his belt, he was accustomed to the long nights and endless asphalt. His rig, an impeccably maintained Peterbilt 579, both fortress and companion. His daily calls home to his wife and teenage daughter were his anchor, a tether to the world beyond the inside of his cab. On a cold November night, Samuel embarked on a routine voyage from Jacksonville, Florida to Baltimore, Maryland, navigating the stretch of Interstate 95 that cuts up the eastern seaboard. This highway, a major artery feeding the economic engine of the Eastern US, held numerous legends among truckers, none more disturbing than those tied to the remote and seldom traveled segment near the small town of Bellamy, North Carolina. Samuel's journey began uneventfully. The chill of the night pressed against his windows, and the steady hum of his rig's engine filled the silence. He settled into the rhythm of the road, eyes scanning the dim approach of mile markers and the distant glint of taillights. At 7:53 p.m., as he reached mile marker 96 near Bellamy, Samuel noticed his radio cracking with static. Normally, a sign he might adjust or ignore, but this time a voice broke through, low and clipped. "Watch the road. Stay alert." Samuel keyed his MIC. "Who's this? Is anyone there?" A pause, and then nothing but static. The radio subsequently filled with increasingly eerie white noise, interrupted by subtle whispers echoing his name and vague phrases. "It waits." The highway breathes. His dashboard flickered, the GPS screen blinking and recalculating, shifting his course toward a narrow exit ramp he hadn't planned to take. Reluctantly, Samuel followed the sudden route. As he descended onto the dimly lit exit, the rig's headlights caught movement just beyond the shoulder, a figure standing amid the fog, unblinking, shrouded in heavy coat and hat, face obscured by shadows. Samuel froze, but the figure melted into the night as he blinked. Minutes later, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "Don't trust the signal. They're closer than you think." Disturbed, Samuel pressed on, but the rig's systems began to betray him. The radio static morphed into fragmented phrases resembling old emergency broadcasts, often distorted but unmistakably urgent. His GPS glitched repeatedly, at one point displaying a route through unmarked forest paths. Driving cautiously, he approached a rest stop surrounded by dense woods and isolated enough to avoid heavy traffic Bellamy Rest. It was 8:30 p.m. Pulling in, Samuel noticed the rest area was deserted save for a creeping fog. The usual lights were dimmed, and the atmosphere was oppressively silent. Inside the small convenience store, he found not a single attendant, only an empty register and shelves stocked with expired items. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. Samuel spun around. No one was there. He frantically tried his radio and phone, but all signals were dead. Then came a faint melody, antique and haunting, playing from an old jukebox in the corner, though the machine was powered down. His eyes caught a series of faded photographs on the wall, featuring truckers from decades past, many tagged with dates later than he could believe. One photo, in particular, showed a weathered truck much like his own parked exactly where he had left his rig. Beneath it, scrawled in white marker, were the words, "Never leave the road." A cold gust swept through the store, carrying whispers that chilled Samuel's very bones. Back in the parking lot, the rig's security camera footage, later reviewed by state police, shows shadowy figures moving just beyond the headlights' reach, lingering ominously near Samuel's rig. Help was nowhere to be found, re-entering his truck. Samuel's controls flickered wildly. The speedometer darted erratically. The steering felt unusually heavy. Suddenly, the radio burst with an urgent transmission. Turn back. The road never forgets. At 9:07 p.m., as Samuel exited the rest stop, he saw headlights behind him, an unmarked semi, with no identifiable markings, following at a steady distance. He accelerated, but the vehicle kept pace flawlessly, its engine sound barely audible. Samuel's heart hammered as he recalled countless legends, the spectre truck that haunts Bellamy, doomed to follow and trap the living driver. His rig's dash cam captured fleeting images of the phantom rig, blurred and shifting, sometimes overlapping with Samuel's own rig in impossible angles. At mile marker 104, Samuel encountered a sudden, thick fog bank enveloping the highway. The rearview mirror reflected the phantom truck grow dimmer until it vanished outright. His GPS recalibrated swiftly, displaying a path toward Bellamy's old logging road, a forgotten dirt trail lined by twisted trees. Against his better judgment, Samuel followed. As he ventured down the narrow path, ditches on either side swallowed stray headlights, and the sound of crunching leaves resonated in the silence. Then, ahead, a faint glow appeared, a flickering campfire with figures huddled near it, indistinct and unmoving. The dash cam recorded the moment vividly. When Samuel tried to get closer, the figures dissolved like smoke, leaving the still red embers behind. His rig's engine stuttered and threatened to die multiple times, and the cold crept deeper inside the cab. At 10:15 p.m., Samuel finally emerged from the forest road back onto the interstate, shaken but unharmed. He drove the remaining miles to his destination at a crawl, haunted by the night's encounters. Following his report, a combined task force investigated the area, collecting radio intercepts, dash cam footage, and reports from other drivers. They documented numerous disappearances, electronic anomalies, and spectral sightings clustered around Bellamy Rest and the nearby logging road. The official case file concludes that the spectre on Highway 95 is an entity or phenomenon not understood by conventional science, capable of manipulating reality and ensnaring unsuspecting travelers. Samuel retired from night routes on the interstate and avoids Bellamy Rest altogether. His story, authenticated by police reports, electronic evidence, and eyewitness testimonies, remains a grim warning for truckers and travelers who might come too close to the haunted highways of the eastern seaboard. On some roads, the past never fades. It follows you down the endless miles, whispering that you belong to the highway forever. And for Samuel Brooks, the spectre still rides just behind, waiting patiently in the dark. The Shadows of the Great Plains. David Montgomery was a 42-year-old truck driver from Wichita, Kansas. Known among his peers as level-headed and vigilant, David took immense pride in his work. His rig, a black Freightliner Cascadia with customized safety features, was his home on wheels during long hauls across the American heartland. Despite the lonelier stretches of highway he traveled, David's nightly calls home to his wife and daughter provided a much-needed anchor. On a chilly October night, David was entrusted with a high-priority shipment of electronics from Kansas City, Missouri, to Denver, Colorado. The route took him across the vast, open expanses of the Great Plains via Interstate 70, a road famous for its beauty, but also for the eerie isolation that can blanket long stretches of prairie after sunset. At 7:18 p.m., as David drove through the small town of Wilson, Kansas, his GPS inexplicably guided him onto a detour. The digital map flashed uncertain symbols and recalculated erratically before directing him toward County Road 1700, an old, seldom used gravel road weaving through the rolling fields and intermittent forests. David hesitated but shrugged it off, trusting his GPS and noting the need to remain timely. As he veered from the main highway onto the gravel road, he was immediately enveloped by an unnatural silence. The usual soundscape of crickets, rustling leaves, or passing motorists was replaced with an unsettling stillness. Then, his CB radio came alive with static, slicing through the quiet, before a low, distorted voice whispered, "Don't stop. Don't look back." Curiosity mixed with unease. David queried the frequency, but only static answered back. Feeling on edge, he glanced toward the rearview mirror and jolted the flickering image of a semi-truck loomed unexpectedly behind him, its headlights piercing the darkness. But the vehicle was unlike any David had seen. The paint was faded beyond recognition, the windows cloaked in darkness with no discernible driver, and the engine's rumble was muffled, almost swallowed by the night itself. Despite accelerating, the mysterious truck maintained its distance with uncanny ease, gliding silently as if tethered to him. Minutes passed with David's heart pounding, the tension growing unbearable. Suddenly, the apparition vanished, leaving only the soft glow of distant stars. As the route curved sharply near a stand of ancient oaks, David noticed peculiar patterns on the roadside tire tracks traced uneven loops, deep impressions that suggested vehicles had driven off the road only to disappear. He pulled into a small rest area, where the gravel crunch was oddly muted beneath his tires. The place was deserted except for a solitary pickup truck parked nearby, its engine idling silently without a driver inside. From the shadows, shapes seemed to flit between the trees, vanishing just before he could focus on them. Reaching for the CB radio, David attempted contact with other drivers, receiving no response, except overlapping whispers repeating phrases such as "lost on the plains" and "the night takes all." David's dash cam, recording the entirety of the trip, later delivered a chilling account. The footage showed blurred silhouettes lingering near the truck, faces pressed against windows, and the eerie presence of the phantom truck weaving alongside him, sometimes merging impossibly with his own rig. At 8:45 p.m., David's GPS malfunctioned again, displaying impossible destinations and arrows pointing of cliffs or through dense woods. The rig's electronics flickered, gauges fluctuated wildly. Despite a growing sense of dread, David pressed forward, only to encounter, at mile marker 302, an abandoned semi-truck, burnt and twisted beyond recognition. Nearby, remnants of cargo scattered a grim reminder of previous victims whose fates were yet unresolved. David's official report to law enforcement detailed the encounter. According to Kansas State Patrol files, the area near County Road 1700 has a long history of strange disappearances and strange phenomena. The investigation found no evidence that would explain the haunting, despite extensive searching aided by aerial drones and ground patrols. After exiting the gravel road and rejoining Interstate 70, David noticed subtle disturbances, mirages of distant fires, unnatural shadows shifting across the highway median, faint cries carried on the wind. His radio finally cleared to a single transmission, a voice stating solemnly, "The planes remember their dead." David completed his delivery the following morning, but was never the same. His company records note increased anxiety episodes and reluctance to drive at night on isolated roads. Declassified documents obtained later reveal that several similar incidents along this stretch have been investigated by federal agencies under code names, suggesting an ongoing but inconclusive probe into these phenomena of the Great Plains. In the vast openness of the plains, where the sky stretches endlessly and silence reigns, something waits. The shadows are patient, the night never forgetting those who passed through. For David Montgomery and many others, the road was more than asphalt and light. It was a crossing into something beyond comprehension. The Great Plains do not forget, and neither do the shadows that haunt them. The vanishing on Highway 17, James Carter was a 33-year-old truck driver known for his meticulous nature and sharp instincts on the road. Hailing from Asheville, North Carolina, he had built a reputation among his peers for being reliable and cautious, especially when traveling the often deserted stretches of mountain highways. His rig was a well-maintained Peterbilt 579, equipped with the latest technology, including a high-definition dash cam and GPS tracker. James was proud of his punctuality and his habit of calling home every evening to check in with his wife and daughter. On the evening of March 22nd, under a twilight sky darkening quickly into night, James set out on a familiar route along Highway 17, which wound its way through rugged terrain and thick forest in the western Piedmont region. The area was known for its breathtaking landscapes, cozy roadside inns, and a handful of small towns that clung to the valley bottoms. According to official traffic data, this road saw relatively low volume during the late hours, adding to the solitude many drivers appreciated, including James. The first anomaly presented itself nearly an hour into his drive. At approximately 7:45 p.m., while passing near the town of Elkin, James noticed a series of reflective markers on the guardrail seemed to shimmer oddly in his headlights. The effect resembled a sudden shimmer of heat rising from pavement, despite the cool March temperatures. He adjusted his mirrors, aware that something was not quite right but unable to name it. Shortly after, the CB radio on Channel 17, the popular truckers' channel for that area, flickered with an unusual burst of static, followed by a voice that was barely audible but unmistakably urgent. "Keep moving, don't stop." They watched the turns. The voice faltered into static again before dropping completely. James reached to switch frequencies, but the radio was jammed with white noise. He jiggled the dials but could produce no clear transmissions. His experienced mind questioned whether it was interference or something stranger. As he continued, the road began to narrow and twist more sharply. Dense woods pressed close on either side, and mist began to coalesce around the tree line, drifting toward the highway like creeping fingers. The temperature inside the cab dropped suddenly, causing his breath to mist before the heater adjusted. At 8:17 p.m., his GPS announced a calculated turn toward the town of Little Switzerland, but the satellite navigation briefly faltered, recalculating erratically. The GPS screen blinked off and on, displaying coordinates that did not match any known location on official maps. James slowed his rig and pulled to the shoulder near a small lookout point marked with a historic plaque referencing old mountain legends. The place was quiet, save for the distant cawing of birds settling down for the night. He stepped out for a moment, jacketed against the chill, and stretched his neck. The vista below revealed a blanket of fog crawling through the valley beneath a familiar sight that suddenly felt otherworldly. Returning to the cab, James noticed a small black folding knife lying on the passenger seat, which he did not recognize or recall placing there. Tentatively, he pocketed it, an odd feeling creeping in that someone or something had entered his vehicle during his brief stop. At 8:54 p.m., headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. A car, low and black, followed James' rig at a cautious distance, never attempting to pass. The vehicle's headlights dipped once, then blinked repeatedly in a pattern James interpreted as a signal. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Minutes later, during a hairpin turn, the black car abruptly vanished from sight. No exit ramps, no side roads, no place for it to turn off. The asphalt showed no signs of breakaway or skid marks. Unease mounted. Over the radio, static morphed into whispering voices. Now and then, he caught a name that chilled him to the core. James, don't trust the path. His gaze flickered to the GPS, which had begun overlaying transparent, ghostly images on its screen maps within maps, some depicting roads erased from memory or existence. Within the space of 20 minutes, James experienced several lapses in time awareness. One moment, his rig chugged along steadily through a wooded stretch. The next, he found himself farther along with no memory of the miles traveled. His odometer reading remained steady, but the feeling that he was caught in some temporal loop gnawed at him. At 9:23 p.m., James pulled off at an isolated rest area. The lot was empty except for a weathered pickup truck parked at the far edge, its lights off and engine cold. No driver emerged. A subtle sound caught his attention, soft footsteps approaching, too light for their pace, as if made by a weightless presence. Heart pounding, James locked the cab and peered into the darkness beyond the track stop lights. He saw an indistinct shape, a figure cloaked in shadow, watching him from the edge of the parking lot. James reached for his phone to call his wife, but found it had no signal, no battery life, despite the device having been fully charged earlier that day. This detail was later confirmed in the forensic examination report, which showed no technical malfunction to explain the sudden power loss. At this point, according to James' official report filed with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, his anxiety escalated into outright terror. He started the rig and attempted to leave, but the engine sputtered as if choked by unseen hands. The dashboard instruments flickered off and on in frantic pulses. Then the radio began to emit a new sound, a pattern of distress signals in Morse code. James, having knowledge from previous training, recognized the signals as a plea for help, repeated over and over in a loop. His dash cam recorded vivid images during this symptomatic episode. Faded road signs displaying the names of towns erased decades ago. Mist thickening into humanoid shapes wandering ghostly along the roadside, and the black car materializing once again in his mirrors, its driver's face never visible. According to a subsequent interview with the investigating officer, local police found traces of unknown footprints encircling James' rig at the rest stop, footprints that abruptly ended as if sinking into the earth. The next morning, authorities recovered James' truck abandoned on the shoulder near a turnoff. He was missing. An extensive search ensued, encompassing hundreds of square miles of forest and mountain terrain, utilizing drones, helicopters, and ground teams. But no trace of James Carter was ever located. According to declassified documents obtained months later through Freedom of Information requests, the case became a focal point of a mysterious series of disappearances along Highway 17. Interagency communications reveal that multiple drivers have reported similar experiences of time loss, strange figures, and spectral vehicles. Investigators concluded, based on James' recorded data and eyewitness testimonies, that whatever haunted this stretch of highway operates outside known physical laws, interfering with electronic devices, altering perception of time and space, and targeting lone travelers. The final line in the police report offers a haunting note left by James before his disappearance, an encrypted message on his rig's GPS reading, deciphered only after the investigation. Trust not the road you know. It is a mirror to what follows. To this day, James Carter's fate remains unresolved. Official records mark him as missing. Last seen on the night of March 22nd on Highway 17. His disappearance, along with similar accounts, stands as confirmation, through eyewitness accounts and verifiable data, that some roads hold secrets beyond understanding, nightmares lurking at the edges of reality, waiting for those who travel the night. In the endless black of a mountain highway, being alone can be deadly. The road appears familiar, but it is a twisting veil concealing dangers no driver should face. For James Carter and countless others, the nightmare was no accident, it was a haunting. The nightmare of Highway 9. Mark Douglas was a 46-year-old veteran truck driver from Portland, Maine, known for his steady nerves and methodical approach to the demanding life on the road. For over 2 decades, he had crisscrossed the country in his favorite rig, a silver International Lone Star, mastering every stretch of highway with precision. Mark favored long, quiet routes, preferring solitude and the steady rhythm of his wheels against asphalt. He stayed connected to his family through nightly calls with his wife and teenage son, grounding himself amid long journeys. On a foggy October evening, Mark took on a critical haul from Boston, Massachusetts, to Charlotte, North Carolina. His route would traverse the often desolate and winding Highway 9, a road snaking through rural landscapes, dense woods, and isolated towns. Known among locals as Shadow's Path, Highway 9 carried an aura of unease. Whispered rumors of disappearances and unexplained phenomena had circulated for decades. Most truckers avoided the route at night, but Mark's schedule left little choice. By 7:30 p.m., Mark had been driving for several hours, the cold October air pressing against his windshield. As he passed through the dense forests near the outskirts of New London, Connecticut, a low-frequency hum began to fill his cab. It wasn't mechanical, but seemed to resonate with the environment around him, vibrating faintly through the rig's frame. The CB radio sparked to life suddenly, filling with static before a voice broke through. It was low, rasping, almost indecipherable. "Turn back. They're waiting. Don't let the road claim you." Mark's voice was steady but alert as he responded. "Who's this?" "Come in, please." Only silence answered, save for the crackle of distant static. Skeptical but cautious, Mark scanned his surroundings. His headlights pierced into thick fog rolling in from the forest, and the trees seemed to close in unnaturally, shadows elongating and twisting. At 8:02 p.m., the rig's GPS displayed an anomaly. The usual highway path vanished from the screen, replaced by a maze of roads, some leading into the woodlands, others dissolving into blinking question marks. The path forward was unclear. As Mark slowed, a series of lights, taillights of a vehicle, appeared in his rearview mirror. At first distant, they quickly closed the gap, but as his foot pressed harder on the accelerator, the vehicle remained precisely in place, matching his speed and maneuvers flawlessly. He flicked the radio again, static spilling into a whisper. "You can't outrun the shadows." Ahead, the highway twisted sharply near an abandoned rest area painted with fading graffiti and weather-worn signs warning of unstable ground. Mark stopped briefly, parking beside an old stone bench. The dash cam captured curious, anomalous blurred figures moving just beyond the tree line, shapes that instantly vanished each time Mark attempted a direct look. He exited the cab, senses prickling. The fog hung thick like damp velvet, and the forest were a silence devoid of usual nocturnal life. As he walked toward the broken shelter, a faint piano melody drifted through the mist, an old lullaby Mark recognized from his childhood, eerie in its context, slow and haunting. From the shadows, a silhouette emerged, that of a man in a faded trucker's jacket, face obscured, eyes hollow and haunting. "Beware the path you choose," the figure whispered before dissolving like smoke. Startled, Mark rushed back to his rig and locked the doors. On restarting the engine, the dashboard flickered violently. Instruments swung unpredictably, and the headlights dimmed until only faint beams remained. The radio silence was brief. Fragmented voices overlaid with eerie, indecipherable noises returned. Suddenly, his rig shuddered violently. According to vehicle telematics collected by Highway Patrol, the controls were overridden by an external force for a brief period. The rig veered sharply off the road, wheels clawing against gravel and dirt before regaining traction. Mark's heart pounded as the fog began to thin, and the familiar lines of Highway 9 emerged once more under a clearing sky. However, a new terror awaited. His dash cam recorded an alternation in time flow. The timestamp jumped erratically, moments stretching and compressing unrealistically. At mile marker 76, his GPS pinpointed a location non-existent on any map-loop path, circling the same dead trees repeatedly, as if caught in a spatial anomaly. Dispatch later confirmed that multiple transmissions from Mark contained messages of distress, distorted audio, and an unidentified voice urging him to abandon the route. Mark completed his journey with a shaken resolve, reporting every detail meticulously. Subsequent investigations by state police confirmed his story, supported by dash cam footage, GPS logs, and corroborating eyewitness accounts from other drivers in the region. Historical records reveal Highway 9 as prior association with mysterious disappearances spanning decades, often linked to late-night travelers. Several trucks abandoned along this stretch were found intact but void of occupants. Federal agencies have classified the area as a zone of anomalous activity, continuing discreet study. Mark retired from nocturnal halls, haunted by fleeting shadows seen through rearview mirrors and whispers in the static. On Highway 9, darkness is more than absence of light. It is a living entity, a patient tenant of the night, waiting to claim those who dare pass through after the world sleeps. For Mark Douglas and many who drive the unfolding ribbon of asphalt, the nightmare is never truly over. The Echoes on Route 20 to Benjamin Harper was a 38-year-old long-haul trucker out of Buffalo, New York. Known among his colleagues for his unwavering calm and strict adherence to schedules, Benjamin had driven countless miles across the northeastern United States. His reliable Freightliner Cascadia was outfitted with a high-end dash cam, GPS, and CB radio, tools he used daily to navigate the constantly shifting rhythms of the road. Despite spending weeks away from home, Benjamin took pride in his nightly phone calls with his wife and young daughter, a brief moment of normalcy amid the solitude of the highway. On a chilly October evening, Benjamin began a straightforward run transporting refrigerated goods from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Hartford, Connecticut. The well-traveled route required him to traverse Route 22, a highway known for its scenic stretches and rural towns, but also for an unsettling legacy of disappearances and strange occurrences. Truckers whispered about the echoes, phantom sounds and voices that seemed to haunt the winding roads after dark. At 7:45 p.m., as Benjamin navigated a remote section near Brownsville, Pennsylvania, the atmosphere in his cab began subtly changing. The familiar hum of his engine was interrupted by a low-frequency whine reverberating softly through the trucker's frame. His dash cam flickered, its screen briefly obscured by fleeting shadows. Before he could react, the CB radio burst to life with piercing static, followed by a gravelly voice barely above a whisper. "Turn back. Don't listen." Benjamin, gripping the steering wheel firmly, attempted a reply. "This is driver 27. If anyone's there, please identify." Only white noise answered. Confused but undeterred, he pressed ahead, eyes fixated on the narrow road that winded between dense woodlands. Thick fog began to swell around the roadside, obscuring the guardrails and dimming his headlights. At 8:03 p.m., a sharp crackle exploded through the CB radio. This time, The voice was clearer, though distorted and urgent. "They watch in the silence. You are never alone." Alarmed, Benjamin glanced in his rearview mirror. The road behind reflected a pair of glowing headlights tracking his every movement, but no vehicle was present on the lane. Questions spiraled in his mind as a series of inexplicable events unfolded. The GPS, an otherwise reliable guide, began rerouting him repeatedly. Each recalculation directed him onto roads not marked on any map or his previous runs. Coordinates flickered, pointing to empty fields or vanished towns. As he slowed to assess the situation, his dash cam recorded unusual images, wisps of what looked like smoke or fog coalescing into humanoid shapes just beyond the tree line. Figures whose eyes seemed to burn with cold light before dissipating. The cold in the cab deepened swiftly, frosting the edges of the windshield. Benjamin's breath misted heavily despite the heater's best efforts, and the sense of an unseen presence pressing close became overwhelming. Approaching a desolate rest area near the Monongahela River, Benjamin pulled in to regroup. The parking lot was empty, except for a solitary pickup truck resting near the far edge. Engine silent, doors closed. Perimeter cameras recorded the empty lot, though their footage later showed shadowy figures flitting between vehicles, more apparition than human. Inside the rest stop building, Benjamin found the usual warmth and light replaced by stale cool air and eerie silence. A single vending machine flickered weakly, no signs of staff or travelers. As he filled a cup with lukewarm coffee, a faint melody drifted through the humid air, an old folk tune Benjamin instinctively recognized, but couldn't he place. The sound was scratchy, warped as if played on a damaged record. From the corner of his eye, he spotted a man standing just beyond the Forked service window. The stranger's face was obscured beneath a hood, eyes fixed steadily on Benjamin. Before he could react, the figure vanished. Rushing back to his truck, Benjamin locked the doors and started the engine. Suddenly, the cab filled with a whispering chorus, unintelligible phrases overlapping and echoing in the cramped space. His CB radio sputtered words he could barely grasp. Names, places, warnings. At 9:04 p.m., the rig lurched violently, the dashboard flashing error codes. The radio scrambled in bursts, distorted voices speaking urgently. "You will be taken if you stay." Benjamin gripped the wheel, heart racing as he maneuvered through a blinding sea of headlights seemingly appearing from nowhere. Trucks lined up on either side of him with no drivers in sight, their windows dark and unresponsive. The dashcam footage later reviewed by authorities revealed a chilling scene. Ghostly rig shadows lined the highway, figures seemingly gliding along forked banks as lights flickered and died. After a nearly palpable standoff with these apparitions, the phantom trucks dissolved, and Benjamin's rig found itself at the edge of a mist-shrouded bridge over the river. The bridge's structure groaned softly beneath his wheels as ethereal voices crescendoed into a desperate wail. At that moment, Benjamin's GPS recalibrated, displaying a safe, clear route to Hartford. He accelerated, heart pounding, the fog thinning until the beams revealed open road. By dawn, Benjamin arrived at his destination, physically unharmed, but psychologically transformed. His subsequent report to the Pennsylvania State Police included his detailed testimony, dashcam recovery, GPS and radio logs. The official files note that Benjamin's encounter closely mirrors prior reports, including those of the echoes, a phenomenon with verified eyewitness accounts, recorded voice distortions, and unexplained disappearances along Route 22. An intelligence task force has since monitored this corridor, issuing warnings to drivers after dark. Benjamin stepped back from night driving on isolated routes after the event, citing persistent feelings of being watched and auditory hallucinations that continue despite daylight. In the heart of the Pennsylvania hills, the echoes are not mere sound but warnings from those lost to the night. For Benjamin Harper, the highway is no longer just a road, but a threshold between the living and something unknowable, where the past remains trapped in restless vigil. And for the long-haul drivers, every mile could bring them closer to the whispers that never disappear. The road stretches on long after the headlights fade. Tonight, we've heard the chilling truth evidence, testimony, and official files revealing that even in the age of technology, there are terrors no GPS can reroute, and warnings no dashboard alarm will signal. Every curve, every lonely rest stop, every midnight radio whisper is a reminder. Real nightmares leave tracks that never wash away. If you found yourself checking the locks on your doors, or thinking about the next empty highway you'll travel, there's more to discover. The world outside your window is stranger than fiction, and we're only beginning to map its darkest corners. So, if you want to be the first to know the stories that most will never dare to tell, tap like to support this channel. Subscribe to Verified Nightmare, your front row seat to the evidence that shatters illusions of safety. And share your own story below. Every comment is seen. Every account will be investigated. Because the night listens. And on this channel, every nightmare is verified. This has been Verified Nightmare. The most dangerous monsters are the ones the world refuses to see. Stay alert, stay curious, until the next story.